Hey guys, welcome to the first video of ProRevenge. Today I have a great story about a mechanical engineer screwing over his old company for firing him over his own patent. Then we have a story about our dad screwing over a bank due to their own mistake. Hope you guys stay tuned and enjoy these stories. Don't fire the guy who holds the patents. This is not my story. I was present for it, sure, but I did not see all of it personally. Rather, this is my father's story. So, some context. My father had a degree in mechanical engineering, either a master's or a doctorate. It had taken him years to get, and he was very proud of it. Thanks to his training, he has found his way working for many well-known companies, working primarily with the procedures used to make various things. Over time, he privately began working on an idea that would revolutionize how school and gym lockers worked. See, my father realized there was a problem with those types of metal lockers. Namely, it was very easy for a person to break into them. What's more, as the lockers were designed, there were multiple exposed moving parts, which meant that if a student put too many books in one, or really anything got against the door, the locker could be jammed shut, making it near impossible to open. So for several years, Dad toyed with a number of ideas, before hitting on a new design which would solve all those problems. The inner workings of the locker's locking mechanism would be contained within the door in such a way that 1. It was impossible for someone to shim or break into, 2. The entire mechanism would be enclosed, and 3. It was relatively maintenance-free. Now at this point, my father was the vice president of manufacturing, and apparently there wasn't a clause in his contract that said that if he designed anything while working for the company, then he'd have to turn it over to them for profit. Dad still approached the company, offering them the design, but they weren't interested. Dad sat on the design for a while, before eventually just taking out several patents on them, and then forgetting about them. About 6 months in his first attempt at getting the company interested, the parent company's owner/chairman of the board passed away, and the board opted to sell off some of the holdings. The company my dad worked for was part of that. The new owners were young guys who seemed to think they knew everything, as young business owners always seem to think. And they set about changing 99% of the way things were being done. At some point, they stumbled across the plans my father designed. Now that's where things turned curious. They really wanted to start producing this new design, but as they didn't have all the plans and processes laid out for them, they had to turn to my father for answers. Rather than asking him how to do it or licensing the patents, as any reputable company would have done, they ordered him to turn over all his work or else they would fire him. Dad stood his ground and refused. The new owners and my father went back and forth, arguing over details for several weeks, before finally the new owners fired my father for insubordination. So on to the revenge. There may be more to this, but I'm not entirely sure if it's just pro-revenge. It could border on nuclear based on what's happened in some years later, though I'm not certain that's what happened later had anything to do with my father's actions. So after cleaning out his office and packing things in the trunk of his car, my father headed home and made a few phone calls. He must have gone through 8 or 9 different calls before he got in touch with someone who was interested in what he had to say. See, my dad was under no illusions that the company that had fired him wasn't going to just make those patented lockers on their own. He knew that the company itself was relatively small, the owners had money, and there was no way he could fight them. However, a larger company could, so he contacted the major competitors and made them an offer. He eventually set up a meeting with some people, wheeled out the prototype he'd made, explained how everything worked, and noted that with this system, the company could revolutionize the way lockers were both designed and improved both safety and security. What's more is that he was the only patent holder for the next 7 years or so. That company could be the only company to produce them. The competitor jumped at the chance and bought all the patents both for the design and the process. They even paid my dad a substantial consultancy fee to go out to their manufacturing site and teach their crews how to make the needed tools and die sets to produce them. Less than 6 months after the first company had fired him, their number one competitor was completely destroying them in the market with this new design, and there wasn't a damn thing the first company could do about it. They did try suing my father, claiming that he had stolen their intellectual property, but that case quickly evaporated when they had to admit under oath that they'd never actually signed a contract with him, and that there was no requirement that he turn over anything he created to the company. In the 7 years from when the second company bought the locker design and process patents, they pretty handily moved into the markets that previously they haven't been able to. The first company soldiered on, but by the time the patent had finally expired, they were a shadow of their former selves. The new owners had sold the company at a loss, with a competitor buying it, only to shut down that production facility due to the redundancy. Put maybe 200 people out of work. Though given how they'd lost so much business, I'd wager that it was far less than that. So yeah, the new guys don't want to play ball, threaten the guy that holds the patents on something they want to do, and then fire him, only to have him take everything to their competitor and effectively put them out of business. Try to squeeze my dad for his money? Tough luck, cause he knows money. The background. Back during the 1997 Asian financial crisis, Malaysia was hit pretty hard, especially the small independent banks. The Prime Minister at the time, Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, passed a bill to save the banking economy by having all the larger corporate banks buy out the smaller independent banks. At the time, he made the One Malaysian Home Loan policy. Under this, all larger banks that bought out the smaller independent banks must send an acknowledgement letter to their home loaners of their original banks stating that the home loan change must receive an acknowledgement form from their new owners, be it a signature, physical, or digital. The story. My dad never liked how banks can legally rob people. For people like him who works the daily grind, having to pay the bank what is essentially 2 houses worth in interest payments over 2 or 3 decades is just plain wrong in his eyes. He strives to one day screw a bank over like how they screw their customers. A contract. Be it sheer dumb luck, or as God listened to his prayers and decided to grant him that opportunity, that was what he got. When my dad bought our family's first home, he got a loan from a small bank called DCB Bank. All is well until a few years later, the 1997 financial crisis hit. As the small banks were bought out by the larger banks, many home loaners receive acknowledgement papers on their new home loan payment plan and policies by their new banks. My dad, for whatever reason, never received his. He only knew that his original bank was bought over by the RHB Bank Corporation, and that he is now unofficially their customer. My dad was frugal with his money, and God bless him, financially literate. He knew that if he made a full settlement against his previous loan, he can avoid paying 30 years worth of interest installments. Sometime in 2007, he went to an RHB bank branch nearby to make a full settlement, and this is how it went down. RHB employer: I'm sorry sir, even if you made a full settlement, you would still need to continue making payments for the interest. Dad: What do you mean? I have a home loan contract under DCB that states I can make a full settlement without paying for additional interests. RHB employer: True, but since you've acknowledged and signed under RHB, Dad, I've never received an acknowledgement papers. I never signed any papers from your bank, and all I have here is a DCB bank contract. RHB employer: Sir, under the One Malaysian homeowner. Dad: You have to send acknowledgement letters about the loan transfer. Yes, I know. What I want now is for you, RHB Bank, to produce my signature of me acknowledging the new loan policy for RHB. As of now, my paper with DCB is still valid until you produce my signature. Cue 1 hour of the employer and her colleagues scrambling around their files and databases trying to find acknowledgement for my dad about their loan contract. At this time, the manager of the bank had called my dad into his office to discuss the problem. It basically had went from a civil to a shouting match that can be heard in the neighboring food stalls. My dad couldn't remember most of what was said, but the end of it was what he could still clearly remember, and to his son, it was probably one hell of a badass combo ender. Manager: I'm sorry, Mr. Muhammad, but you still need to make the interest payments, regardless of whether you make the full settlement. Dad: Alright, I understand. I'll just have to take this up to Bank Negara, National Bank of Malaysia. Let them help you find that signature of mine. My dad had the bank manager by his balls now. Rather than risking potential $1 million lawsuit and possibly losing his job, he excused himself to make a few phone calls to upper management, which took about half an hour. After said phone calls were done, the manager approached my dad and agreed to the full settlement without the additional interest installments. To add salt to the wound, my dad requested that they have his housing grant ready within the week, to which they delivered. All in all, my dad managed to secure himself a house, the housing grant, and the process screwed RHB Bank of what is equal to 60,000 USD worth of interest payments, which, to a middle-aged Malaysian in 2007, is a retirement fund. Thanks everyone for watching my first episode of ProRevenge. If you have any tips or ideas for future videos, please let me know in the comments. And with that, thanks for watching.